most human events yield to the erosion of time. The greatest, most amazing exception to this generalization occurred on the hill of Golgotha. A man, a Jew, some sort of dissident religious prophet, was crucified with two common thieves. In the teachings of this man were two things. First, the principle of charity, or love. But secondly, the possibility of redemption in the face of self-knowledge and penitence. Combination of these two things, charity and redemption, inspired an entire vast civilization, created a great art, erected 100,000 magnificent churches, shaped and disciplined the minds and the values of many generations, placed, in short, its creative stamp on one of the greatest of all flowerings of the human spirit. I thought these reflections were noteworthy in that they came from not a religious thinker, but a statesman. They were written by George F. Kennan, the American statesman and geopolitical thinker. And I would like to have these reflections of Mr. Kennan in the backdrop as we celebrate now the words, through his own words, the life and legacy of Martin Luther King, Jr. You know, Dr. King was much loved, but he was likewise much despised. And I think we forget that at our peril, because those poles are still in the world very much today. The followers of Dr. King, as Henry Ramsey was, and the opponents of Dr. King. Dr. King was very much touched and moved and troubled by the hypocrisy that surrounded him. And he used, almost as a lifelong text from which to preach, those words that he found in the book of Amos. The book of Amos in the Old Testament, where the Hebrew God is chastening his children. The Hebrew God fussed with his children quite a lot. And he was chastising the children of Israel in this passage for false piety, for trying to be slick, for trying to flatter him unnecessarily. The passage says, though you offer me meat offering and burnt offering, I will not accept them. And neither will I regard the peace offering of your fatted beasts. Take away from me the noise of your songs, for I will not hear the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down as waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. My beloved friends, I appear before you tonight on this mournful midnight in Memphis, with boundless gratitude for your comforting presence and in humility, and with a renewed faith in the miraculous healing power of love. As we have traveled this country, from Montgomery to Birmingham, from Selma to Albany, Georgia, from St. Augustine to Chicago and points in between and beyond, engaged in nonviolent direct action, in protest of bigotry and hypocrisy in our country. We often find the need to explain and somehow justify our nonviolent code. Nonviolence is not for everyone. There are some who mock us, who say that it will not work. And here I'm thinking in part of some of our disaffected black youth and others as well. Those who say that we are foolish not to strike back when under attack, that the only thing our opponents really understand is the language of the sword, the language of the fist. It has been said that we are so anxious to extract that which is good from our opponents, so eager to convert, that we lose sight of the awful reality that stares us in the face and threatens our very existence. Yes, we are accused of being head-in-the-sand dreamers and pathetic wishful thinkers. But I have to tell you tonight, my friends, despite the criticism and the attacks upon our methods, despite the beatings and the bombings and the jailings and the threats of death that we've had to endure, that despite the behavior on the part of some of our opponents, which makes our critics seem right and us mistaken, but I shall never abandon my commitment to nonviolence. And I'll tell you why. You see, I am persuaded that the use of violence in our quest for freedom and dignity is both impractical and immoral. Impractical and immoral. Violence is impractical because it is as a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. You know, Gandhi was right. An eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. Violent retribution is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than win his understanding and friendship. It seeks to annihilate rather than befriend. And finally, violence is immoral because of its very nature, which is to say that it thrives on hatred rather than on love. It destroys community, makes brotherhood impossible, it creates bitterness in the survivors, even as it brutalizes the destroyers. And so violence, it seems to me, is clearly antithetical to the creation and maintenance of the beloved community, which we, in our nation, in our movement, seek for this country and this world. That is why I believe that if the American Negro or other victims of brutal oppression should succumb to the temptation to employ the use of violence in our struggle for freedom, that future generations will be the recipients of a desolate night of bitterness, and our chief legacy to them shall be an endless reign of chaos. But we've come to see, with Mohandas K. Gandhi and with Jesus of Nazareth and with other prophets, renowned and obscure, that the nonviolent method is not a weak method. It is not for the weak and the passive-minded, for it takes a strong man, it takes a resolute woman, a woman full of courage and a heart full of love to stand there, non-violently, against the violent opposition. Let me tell you, I know that there are those who will ridicule nonviolence now and then. But it has certain practical consequences that we might well consider. Nonviolent resistance exposes the moral defenses of the opponent. It weakens his morale, and all the while it is working on his conscience, and that is because he does not understand our willingness to suffer. It disarms him, and he just does not know what to do. If he puts us in jail, that's fine. If he doesn't put us in jail, that's fine. If he beats you, all right. If he doesn't beat you, all right. If he threatens to kill you, all right. You develop the quiet courage, dying if necessary for your innermost conviction. I would submit to you tonight, my friends, that if a man does not have something that he's willing to die for, that man is not fit to live. There is something about nonviolent resistance that causes the opponent not to know what to do. Now, he would know what to do with violence. You're playing his game when you become violent. He would gladly call out the local police, the state militia, the National Guard, and maim and kill hundreds of innocent people, and proclaim that they were inciting riot. They know how to handle violence. Proven it over and over again. But they have proven time and time again that they do not know how to handle nonviolence. Oh, I remember in the early days they tried to solve this problem by throwing us in jail. And what did we do? We went into those jails. And we made a joyful noise there with our spirituals and our freedom songs. And we transformed those jails from dungeons of shame to havens of human dignity and freedom. Oh, I believe nonviolence is the way to us, absolutely. But I must confess that my loyalty to nonviolence goes beyond a tactical maneuver. Because you see, my faith is the faith of nonviolence. We are commanded to love one another. We are taught to love not only those that love us, but to love even those who hate and persecute us and revile us before the world. Yes, we are taught to love our enemies. People ask me about this all the time. You know, Reverend King, what are you meaning when you teach that we should love these people who are beating us and bombing our houses and kicking our children around? What do you mean that we should love such people? And then I must pause and try to define the word love as I understand it. And I am reminded that the Greeks of ancient time can come to our aid in understanding this very difficult teaching, because the Greeks, you see, discovered that the concept love can be appreciated in three different ways, and there are three different words for the dimensions of love in the Greek New Testament. One of them is the word eros. Eros. Nowadays, of course, the word eros and eroticism have fallen upon hard times. They've acquired certain base and lascivious connotations, thanks in part to the residual effects of our Puritan heritage and to Hollywood and other centers of desecration. The Greek philosopher Plato described it as a kind of aesthetic love, eros, which Plato defines as the yearning of the soul for the realm of the divine. The yearning of the soul for the realm of the divine. We've all experienced eros. We've all read about its beauties in the great pictures of literature. In a sense, Edgar Allan Poe was talking about eros when he talked about his beautiful Annabel Lee with a love surrounded by a cloud of eternity. In a sense, Shakespeare was talking about eros when he said, love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it It is an ever-fixing mark that looks on Texas and is never shaken. It is the start of every wandering bark. You know, I will always remember that sign because I used to quote it to my wife when I was still courting her. That's arrogance. And then the Greek language has another word. This word is called philia. Philia. You know it. Philia. Philadelphia. City of brotherly love. And this is a higher love that outlasts the heated passions of eroticism. This is an intimate affection between personal friends. And on this level, we love because we are loved. We love people that we like. This is friendship. Friendship. Not, I would hasten to add, the kind of transitory here today, gone tomorrow friendship which so many people associate with places like Los Angeles. The kind of deep and abiding friendship that is so palpably present in this room tonight. It is called philia. And then the Greek language has another word, love. Agape. Agape. Agape is more than romance. Agape is greater than friendship. Agape is not something that is affectionate. Agape is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all mankind. It is an overflowing love that seeks nothing in return. Theologians would say that it is the love of God operating in the human heart. And when a man or a woman rises to love on this level, he loves all of humanity, not because he lacks them, but he loves every man because by God, the God who is merciful and forgiving, he himself is love. So he rises to a level of rejecting and despising even a social or political structure that warps the souls of people while loving the individuals who's caught up in that system. He loves the person and he hates the the evil being. That is what Jesus meant when he said that we must love our enemies. He didn't say we had to like them. And I'm glad he did it sometimes. He said we must love them. And I believe that without this transcendent love operating in our hearts, that all of our militant efforts for permanent and everlasting freedom and equality will come to naught. I think that my greatest disappointment, and I have had many, and most enduring frustration has been the posture of the white Southern church with regard to our struggle. I hoped from the beginning that the white church would rush to aid and even to take a lead in this righteous struggle that we're leading. How wrong I was. How terribly wrong. With rare exception, the white Southern church has been either complicit in the opposition to our request for human rights, or it has remained strangely silent, which amounts to the same thing. You remember, it was clergymen. It was a group of clergymen, white clergymen, who lashed out against our efforts in Birmingham in 1963. These clergymen resurrecting the old canard about how happy their Negroes were, how they had accommodated themselves to the segregation and humiliation of the South, and how content they all were and would have remained had these outside agitators not appeared on the scene and lead them astray. These clergymen in their full-page position paper in the Birmingham News, said that we were outside agitators. They called us extremists. They said that our demonstrations were ill-timed and ill-conceived. Well, as to this last point, I do not believe that I have ever led a direct action campaign that was well-timed and well-conceived by the timetable of those who would oppose us. It never happened. Outside agitators. My reading of history has assured me that privileged groups never surrender their position of privilege unless pressured to from without. And as Reinhold Niebuhr has assured us, groups are more immoral than individuals. Have we been extreme? That is a charge against us, that we are extremists. And upon reflection, I think that measured against certain practices that present themselves as normal in some of our southern communities, perhaps our efforts have been and can be considered extreme. But the relevant question, it seems to me, is not whether we are extremists, rather what kind of extremists are we to be? Are we to be extremists for the perpetuation of hate, or extremists for love? Are we to be extremists for the continuation of injustice in the world, or extremists for the noble cause of justice? In a real sense, we keep rather notable company, we extremists for justice and understanding. Was not Jesus an extremist in love? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, pray for them that despitefully use you. Was not Amos an extremist in justice? He said, let justice roll down as waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Was not Thomas Jefferson an extremist for democracy? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Was not Abraham Lincoln an extreme patriot? This nation cannot survive half slave and half free. And so I am happy to take my stance with these extremists for justice and understanding, whose messages were universal and everlasting. That is why I believe that we should continue in the campaigns that we are running across this nation, and that is the reason that I believe that we, as a movement, must now move to adopt what I would like to call a world perspective. A world perspective. We must do this because of the imperatives of life on this planet. For we're all bound together in a single thread of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. We are made to live together because of this unifying, integrated principle of reality. John Donne knew it. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the man. Then he goes on to complete that piece by saying that any man's death diminishes me because I am involved with mankind. Therefore, never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls thee. So let us develop a world perspective. We may say with absolute conviction that we are the concerned and compassionate brothers and sisters of all those multitudes whose lives are being destroyed around the world, whether in South Africa, South America, South Vietnam, or South Carolina. And let us step up and say that we are their brothers, and that their pain is our pain. Well, Maybe I talked enough today, but I cannot forget. It was a number of years ago. I was in New York City, in Harlem, autographing copies of the first book that I had written. And as I sat there signing autographs, a rather strange appearing woman approached the table. I barely noticed her. I saw her from the periphery only, and I was looking down writing, and the only thing I heard her say was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And I was signing the books, and I said yes. And suddenly, I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I'd been stabbed by this demented woman. The blade had gone through my chest. Well, I was rushed to Harlem Hospital with a dark, dreary, overcast day. And at the hospital, the doctors discovered that the tip of the blade was resting right at the edge of my aorta, the main vessel. And once that's punctured, you drown in your own blood. That's the end of it. A news story came out the following day reporting on the attack at the New York Times that if I had died with the blade and if I had